morning, everybody. If you notice, Craig is not with us. Not sure where he is. Haven't heard from him in the last couple of days, so he's gone dark. And rapid fire could not be the same without him, so we'll skip that portion of our program and bring it to you in 2 weeks. It is November, which is Mental Health Month, and we have a very special interview with author Jeff Gould, who wrote a great book. Chronicling his addiction and homelessness and mental health, his struggle with mental health issues. And he came out the other side, amazingly enough, and you absolutely won't believe his story. So my own bout with depression, I think I've said it here before, and I think I say it in the interview too, but mine was relatively minor. It happened in about 1996. And really just I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to talk to anybody. It really manifested itself in me just wanting to be alone and not have to deal with anybody. So if you're dealing with mental health crisis, you can get help. Talk to your family doctor, or you can call 988. That's 988 is the suicide crisis line. So if you're in a dark place and you need some help, there's help available. And so don't hesitate to ask. I was lucky that a friend of mine recognized the signs and told me to talk to my doctor. And she just tried me out on a couple different antidepressants. But once I got on Prozac, I was on it for about 6 months. And yeah, I was fine after that. And I find that as long as I'm active and I don't get into a rut, then I'm fine. So when I start to get it, I can feel it coming back. But so I have to fight against it. But we all have our struggles. Good friend of mine today is having a birthday. Coralie Hall, formerly Coralie Hall, now Coralie Fletcher in Saskatchewan. If you're watching, happy birthday, sweetheart. Love you and want nothing but the best for you. So talk to you soon. So I'm not going to babble on here too long because we're going to get to the interview, but I just wanted to give a shout out to a few of the YouTube channels and podcasts that I listen to. And I was going to get Craig to do the same thing, but as you can see, Craig's not here. So the first one is Hollywood Graveyard. This is a great YouTube channel. He goes to all these famous graves, and it's not just ultra famous people. It's people behind the scenes, anybody who is even just like well known. And he goes all over the world and finds their graves and tells a little bit of their story and whatnot. It's a fascinating channel. I got hooked on it, and the guy's name is Arthur Dark, and we have emailed him hoping to get him on the channel and tell his story because it's pretty fascinating, I find, anyway, what he does. So anyway, the next one is John Fugelsang podcast. As you can see, humor, religion, and politics. This guy is hilarious, and he is uber smart. He knows the Bible backwards and forwards, calls out the hypocrisy in organized religion and people who claim to be, Christian, but really are just full of hate and racist and stuff like that. So he cuts like a knife, and he's very smart and very sharp and very quick. So and another one is Bob Seska, who he has the same type of podcast, but a little bit different. Their formats are a little bit different. Seska is a little bit more humor oriented, and but he does deep dives into all these things as well, and they actually appear on each other's shows all the time. So those are three that I really like, and check them out if you feel the urge to. And that's all I'm going to say right now, and we'll just get right to the interview. So enjoy. The hockey books and storytellers, everybody, and Tone and I are more than pleased to have today's guest. It's author Jeff Gould. Now, he's written a very important book entitled A Life Concussed, a Memoriam of Brain Injury, Addiction, and Homelessness. It's a very personal view of brain trauma and the effects it can have on one's life journey. With November being Mental Health Month, we thought it important to do a deeper dive into this subject, as most of us just have a 30,000-foot view of mental illness. Now, Jeff is an author, blogger, humorist, and public speaker. He has worked in the field of addiction and substance abuse as a crisis interventionist / program administrator for over a decade. He comes to us from Dallas, Texas, and most importantly, he is a hockey fan. And what a story he has to tell. So welcome to Hockey Books and Storytellers, Jeff.
Oh, thank you. It's very good to be here. And I just realized the bio must be a little outdated because it's been, you said, well over a decade. I'm like, it's been 2 decades now. So I've been doing this for a while. I know this is a British Columbia-based podcast. I am a Vancouver Canucks fan. Got it tattooed on my knuckles, as a matter of fact. So, and it looks like, we had an ugly few games there, right? But it was like, back to this. But last couple games, I mean, they look great in Florida. When they're playing like that, they can beat anybody, So, anyway, but it's good to be here with you fellas.
So how did you become a Canucks fan? Because Craig hates you already.
Okay, so I know we're primarily focused on mental health. So I was never, I played some like AYSO soccer and by a kid, I mean 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. One time went to the state tournament. But by the time high school came around, I wasn't watching sports. I wasn't, let alone participating in sports. My problems, some of my mental health problems that we'll go into, there was a pretty vicious onset pretty young. So I was pretty checked out of life and already had a lot of problems as a teenager. So sports were the furthest thing from my mind, or even watching television or anything like that. So, fast forward, 22 years ago, my friend John came and broke me out of a residential treatment center. I was being treated for drugs and alcoholism 22 years ago, still the same clean time I have now. And he said, hey, I want to take you to a hockey game, and they gave me a little Friday night pass to go out. And we went and saw the University of Arizona Ice Cats play the ASU Sun Devils, who ended up jumping to Division I. And these guys, it's just D2, but to me it looked like they were skating like the wind. The teams hate each other. Every single player dropped gloves at the end of the ice, and it was just a full, we won like 4-3. It was a line brawl. But the truculence and the speed of it, it really activated something in my spirit. And I think I even cried for the national anthem. I just seeing them skate out of the gate and just kind of like the maelstrom of them skating in circles, it did then and it does now. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. And it was like, whoa, this is a thing, right? That just kind of found me. And so, one of you's read the book, the other one hasn't. I've never in my life done anything a little bit. So it wasn't like I'll just get season tickets to the Ice Cats, right? That's what a normal human being would have done. But no, I've traveled. I've seen 6 leagues across 2. Well, I guess Canada and US are one continent, but I've been to EIHL games. I've got 130 jerseys from probably 16 leagues, and have just seen and explored hockey at every level. I think I've been to 14 NHL arenas. And so that's just my style, right? I never do anything a little bit. Anyway, how did I become a Canucks fan?
Love it.
I actually had to pick a team. So I'm living in Tucson. The Coyotes were never, they're really easy not to like when you live there. It was a pretty undynamic team at the time. I really didn't like the Kachina artwork, and it was just like, yeah. And so it's kind of a closet kind of Devils fan. It's what people in the United States do, except, you just pick a team. Usually it's like the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though you live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, or whatever. Anyway, I've been watching the Devils for a while, and while I'm kind of ashamed to admit it, I saw the Green Man on Sports Center in 2009, and I was like, what? And I was like, I need to kind of tune it. Like, I need to go check that out. Like, something's going on there that just seems kind of freaky and kind of cool, you know? And yeah, and then this was pre-Cup run, but I just started watching all the games, and you know, not to sound poetic about this, but love and reverence is an interesting thing. Like, you can't really explain logically why you love what you love. It's like, why do some people love
what you're attracted to?
Yeah. And so, yeah, but it just, I mean, I've really been, I guess it'll be 15, 16 years now. About 14 of them have been pretty rough. Like, there's been a lot of times to jump ship, man. Remember that we had there was just some grim years in the 20 teens where we we'll get a Jim Vanderbeek and throw it. Maybe that'll straighten out the shit. You know, it was just this revolving.
Hey, we've got a lost decade in the Oilers world too. So
yeah, probably even worse actually, but
true story.
Yeah, just burning through first round picks and sitting near the bottom, and it's nice to have. It's nice.
You're hitting all the sore points for Greg. So keep going.
06 to 16, not oil glory years.
Right.
Yeah. Ask him about Nail Yakupov.
I was on some Twitter thread, and you know, people were first it's the Edmonton Mall, and then someone will throw some politics in there, and then it started getting really nasty. Like, the next time you're in Edmonton, like, I'll beat your ass, dude. Just meet me on the corner. And I just kind of jumped in and was like, isn't this great, guys? Like, both teams frankly sucked for a long time, and now we have like a real rivalry. Like, how cool is that? Vancouver hasn't really had a rivalry, not really, since, I'm not going to say Boston's a rival because we play them twice a year, but like Chicago probably. So it's been in LA a little bit, and Seattle doesn't count because fans and media don't create rivalries like hockey does, right? And that dirty play or that laid out player just hasn't been there yet. So yeah, it's nice as a Vancouver fan to have somebody to hate. You know what I mean? It's great. Yeah, makes for lots of conversation. So
those fringe fans during that series on Twitter, where there was a lot of lines crossed. I'm sure some on the Edmonton, but it was definitely a Vancouver based. Like, everybody on the radio and stuff here was just like, time out. We're playing hockey. We're not saving lives. Like, this is crossing the line.
It was definitely offside.
I appreciate that, and I will tell you, as a Vancouver fan, there was a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda. Yeah, but Brock Besser, and we were on our third string goalie. And the truth is, the better team won. The better team always wins the series. It's just it doesn't matter if. Well, what if Thatcher Demko wasn't injured? It doesn't matter. He was. Like, it was what it was. But it was, it was a good series. And actually, Vancouver were like, and I will say that from both series, they had some really magical moments. It happened 2 or 3 times where
especially that Nashville series.
Yeah. There was a couple of those where it was just watching them pull a win out of a loss was like the stuff they write movies about. But just playing consistently good enough hockey to get to the top. No, they weren't there. You know what I mean? They weren't there. It was a lot of fun to watch, and there was some magical moments in there. But anyway, so yeah.
Well, let's get to your book, Life Concussed. Now, you were born in California and you moved to Tucson as a young child?
I was. My dad, my dad ended up working in nuclear. He made computer chips for nuclear weapons. After he got out of the Air Force / Army, he served time. He did a stint in both. At the time, he interestingly owned a series of failed hair salons. Like, what a weird arc his life took. And my mom was an Air Force nurse, and yeah, they got divorced in '77, and so we would have grown up in I don't know if you guys know Los Angeles, but like kind of South Bay, Lawndale, Hawthorne, Long Beach, which was pretty like middle class back then, and it's not so much anymore. Like South Bay is probably not the place to raise a family, you know what I mean? But anyway, yeah, we moved to Tucson, I guess in 1977, which
And your parents had like a not an amicable split, right?
no,
You kind of left in the middle of the night.
For forensic work is well, going through mental health stuff, right? It's interesting because if you dig deep enough, there's a lot to be said from the soil you were sprouted from, so to speak. It's usually not the clearest line. I saw a meme that was so interesting, and it took me a long time to get this, but children that are abused don't end up hating their parents. They end up hating themselves. You know what I mean? That's what happens. And so yeah, my dad was hard. He's been married 6 times and fathered 4 children, and he was pretty hard on all of them, and he's really hard on all his wives. And so there was a lot of, battery going on in the home, a lot of insulting and stuff. And my mom had pretty good cause to leave. So yeah, we fled in the middle of the night. I remember a lot of broken dishes, a lot of the sound of smashing furniture, the sound of breaking glass, and then the sound of a car starting at midnight, and like, we're out of here, and how cool is that like a lot of women can't do that, but she planned her escape and was like, you know what? I don't need a guy to help me out. I'm going to do this on my own. And so yeah, we came here. Well, not here. I'm living in Dallas now, but we went to Tucson when we were pretty young. So
how old were you when your mom packed up?
5, probably. And at that point, my sister had already had a concussion from my dad. She was on a bunk bed, and he it's okay. My dad's never going to listen to this podcast, and you don't know him anyways. And I'm comfortable letting the facts be the facts. But he had grabbed her by her ankle and jerked her off a bunk bed, and her head hit the floor. You know what I mean? 6-7 feet down, and she probably had a pretty gnarly concussion at like 4, 5, 6 years old, something like that. And so yeah, so there was cause to leave for sure. And we just kind of went to Arizona, and got enrolled in actually at the time private Catholic school. You know what I mean? My mom was like that kind of a person that really believed in her kids having a good education. Yeah, she was a cool lady. An awful lot went wrong in the next 20 years, and really through no fault of hers, I would say. So yeah.
So and then. How did your first concussion come about?
Man, you guys know growing up with that idiot that, like, it's not even like you dared him. It's like he dared himself. Like, you dare me to do a double back flip off this apartment into that pool, and then he shatters his leg. And it's like, I was kind of that guy for a little bit. I was like, hey, do you dare me to jump this picnic table on a BMX bike? I'd never jumped a bike, just kind of assumed I could do it, was watching Evel Knievel. And I don't think I pulled up. I don't think I had a good pull on them handlebars. And I just went ass over hat, head hit a rock right in the middle of the ground. And I just remember just swimming in black, right? And you've got the grass and the gravel kind of stuck to your face, and your buddy's waking you up. And all of a sudden the sensation of light coming in through your eyes is really kind of overwhelming. And I actually, there's a thing they call Erlin syndrome. It's associated with concussion, where sometimes you'll read a book and you'll see it the typeface almost looks 3-dimensional, or you'll see the letters kind of start to float off the page. And it's actually tied directly to the optic nerve. But yeah, a lot can go wrong. Sometimes one eye will kind of vibrate. And it can result, even though it's a visual thing, it can result in well, actually, no, I think today is about storytelling. I could take it a whole different route and go into the technical and the mechanical as a brain injury, because that's the field of work I work in. But a lot can happen with a concussion that can give you a lot of where I was going to go with that. A lot of people don't know this. It's really easy to get a false ADHD diagnosis from having a concussion. So when your vision's not making sense or it's not lining up with the audio, which are those two programs, what happens is your attention network will start to cave in, your prefrontal cortex. And if you're a kid in class, it'll look like you're not paying attention, right? Like, we got to put this kid on Adderall. Like, he can't pay attention. He has ADHD. But if you never stopped and asked the question, have you hit your head anytime recently? You might know that he doesn't have ADHD. It's that his eyes and his hearing, those programs no longer line up in the front of his brain, and his brain can't make sense of the world. So it stops trying to, right? In essence.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So that's what you went through. You were in school and you just couldn't pay attention, and
I mean,
problems started arising.
So that was concussion number one at 11. And then 2 years later, I was with the same friend that with the picnic table. Was good, and same friend because it was my best friend, right? And we played, this is 1981, 82. So we were like playing like Dungeons and Dragons, and like, I think we had like mongoose bicycles, but we wanted like a Haro bicycle or something. I'm just kind of giving you guys what was going on at that time.
How old are you, Jeff?
At the time, I would have been about 10, 10
Okay.
or 11, 10, 11. So I'm kind of bad with time. So I was a seventh grader when the second one happened at the same person's house. To this day, we don't know why, but there was a door that wasn't on the hinges like a door should be. It was like leaning against the wall. Maybe they were replacing the door frame. Who knows? But there was a door unhinged at his house, and somehow that door tipped. I'm in the middle of the room. It's his bedroom, and somehow that door tipped, and I think I heard the whoosh, and I turned around to look up, and the edge of it just clipped me in the mouth, and it was pretty savage. It took about half my lip off. I remember. I don't know exactly what happened, but I remember taking my tongue and kind of moving it around, and everything felt really out of place. Like, all my teeth weren't pointed down. They were kind of pointed west. And there was another good handful of whole teeth, molars and all, just lying in front of me. And so half my lips hanging off, a bunch of my teeth are pointed west. And it kind of crushed my upper mandible. And so, the family was super smart. They took teeth and put them in a jar of water and rushed to the emergency room, who calls it the ER version of a dentist. It's like kind of immediate maxillofacial orthodontic surgery or something like that. And of course, they did put me in a what we call a CAT scan, right? Pretty standard, kind of like the Kodak camera of brain scans. And the criteria for a brain injury at the time was, have you had a stroke? Which means, do you have a vascular bleed in your head, or do you have a brain bleed right now from results getting hit? And it'll show you if you do. And I didn't have that. And I think there are other criteria. Is your skull cracked? But a skull's pretty thick, dude. It's hard. I mean, you can get hit in the head with a hammer to not crack your skull. And so I didn't fit the criteria. So they said, you don't have a brain injury, and, wired my head shut and screwed some teeth back in, and the whole being mom is like, wow, this is she just felt so powerless and so helpless. And here she is working 60 hours a week at the hospital to try and pay for school and mortgage and cat food and dog food and sock some money away for college, just doing the single parent, like the latchkey kid thing, if we're being honest. And both our kids just completely come off the rails. We don't use the front door anymore. We just, when we want to go out, we just leave through the window. You know what I mean? Just open the window and maybe hitchhike downtown, maybe be gone for a day or two, may or may not come back and like, hey, where's my $10 allowance? You owe me $10. And it was, I think she was just kind of hanging on. My sister had some other stuff going on that really sorted itself out for her pretty quick. Well, in the sense that she by high school, her drugs and stuff were like, she was kind of done with that, all that. She went to be on the Dean's Honors List at the University of Arizona. But my, darkness, as it were, it took, well, one of you has read the book, it just kind of took off. And I never really did come all that close back to planet Earth of just moving through. I remember as a teenager, I didn't have a good sense of who I was as a human being. I don't remember particularly being a people pleaser per se, but I do remember trying on a few different outfits in high school. All of them were extreme, like the John Lennon glasses, and I'll be a hippie and I'll take all this LSD, or then I'll be a new waver, and then I finally got the spike leather jacket on and no, I'll be a punk rocker. But there was just a lack of self-identity. I because of the concussion, I definitely had memory issues. I definitely couldn't seem to focus or concentrate on anything. And I had this, when I talk about untreated addiction or untreated alcoholism, there's a feeling that accompanies that I would describe as this, since we're talking about, that feeling when you go to get a root canal and they're like, just 15 minutes, sir, and we'll call you back. And you're kind of sitting there and you're like, yeah, and your shirt kind of doesn't seem to fit right. And it's a little warm in here. I'm just kind of, I got to tell you, I felt that way everywhere, all the time, walking into junior high, walking into high school. If you take the word disease and split it into two parts, it means disease, right? I was just at ease with myself all the time, and somewhere, just going to alcohol, somewhere between drinks 3 and 10 seemed to alleviate that fact. So the problem when you're a teenager, right, is you can't go to high school drunk. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, we think you have a problem with alcohol. And I didn't have the verbiage to explain it. Like, it's a problem for you, clearly, or I wouldn't be standing here talking. But I didn't have the verbiage to tell them, actually, I'm kind of okay right now. You seem like you're tripping on it, but I've had a few drinks and I feel like I could go get a job and make the pieces fit and ask the pretty girl to dance at high school and get myself sorted out. And I don't think a lot of people think this. They think a drug problem or an alcohol problem is a problem with drugs. No, it's a problem with reality, with a drug solution. That's kind of what it means to be a drug addict. So here I am over in left field, my biology, because alcoholism runs in my family. I'm just genetically predisposed to get a heightened sense of pleasure out of a drink of alcohol and other things. And over here, I've just got these ping pong and emotions, a really volatile nature. I can't seem to think straight. I can't seem to remember anything. And so as a young person, foundationally, 15, 16 years old, this isn't a good kind of platform to sort of spring forward into anything that's going to resemble success in life, right? And so, I mean, depends how long you want to talk about it. But I based on those two dispositions, one, having a penchant for drugs and alcohol, and two, having a brain injury, and also being a pretty extreme guy. Like, back to the hockey thing, I never do anything like a little bit, right? I do everything a whole lot. So it stands to reason that predisposition, if you will, put me and other people in some really bad situations.
You had a lack of fear.
Yes, it would appear that way. It would appear that way, but if you really peel back the layers, I was terrified all the time. I worried about
that fear. Like initially, you're talking about how you dressed, and you probably didn't give a fuck about what anybody else thought in high school. No fear to jump that picnic table. But then when you started to get into that 3 to 10 beers or drinks or drugs, then did you start to, that fear morphs itself at that point? I think did you start to care a little bit more, or have a little less, or like a more genuine fear or care about you or other people?
If you watched me long enough, and at least one person had made this comment, when there's a lot of people that experience drug dependency in their life, there's an injury with some opioids. But and I know the real McCoy when I see it, like there's just no brakes on the car here, and they're so embedded in drugs and alcohol that it really starts to alter their personality in a way. Again, I'm putting on my mental health clinician hat, in a way that appears almost sociopathic, right? Of just like, wow, I've seen people. The parents went on vacation. I knew a guy named Bill. His parents went on vacation, and he literally had a yard sale and sold all their furniture. They came home to an empty house. Like, I never did that, but that's the kind of presentation I'm talking about, of like really dark and extreme, and like this person doesn't even have a conscience. So and I was that. I didn't do that, but I've done some really extreme things. In my addiction. And I remember, I'm going to fast forward about 10 years. And I remember I had kind of reached, so I was on the last of about 6 jobs that all lasted about a week. And I was working at a microbrewery on campus. I'd been there for 2 days. And they said, hey, carry this stack of dishes. I was probably washing dishes or something. And I was carrying a stack of dishes across the kitchen floor, slipped in a puddle of grease on the cook's line. One of the knives comes, nearly chops my finger. My finger's dangling off. And they're like, hey, we're gonna file a workman's comp claim. You're gonna need plastic surgery on the tendon on your finger. So I go to the hospital, and they're like, pee in this cup. You know what I mean? And sure, I'll pee in this cup. And when I went back to circle the claim, they're like, dude, you drop dirty for everything. For crystal meth, for heroin, for cocaine, for Valium, for alcohol, for marijuana. They're like it was like a 10-panel cup, all 10 panels, you know what I mean? And all they had to say was like, you're fired. You know what I mean? You're fired. It's another story, a 12-step, but I actually went back and, there's this piece of 12-step called amends, and I've actually gone back. I made amends to them, and I was like, man, I worked there 2 days. It must have cost you $10,000. You know what? Maybe more, maybe 20, 25. Who knows? But
I'm reading your book. You kind of pissed me off a little bit. Like, I'm reading your book, and I'm getting mad at you. Because there were certain times in your life where you're getting the ship turned around to go, you're going upstream, and you finally turn the canoe around to go downstream, and you get most of the way there, and then you just fall back and do something like go to a friend's house where there's going to be drugs and alcohol and everything, and then all of a sudden the canoe is pointed back upstream again. And this happens time and time and time again. And so I'm getting pretty pissed off at you, because it's like, dude, can't you see what you're doing to yourself? And you seem to know what your triggers are. And so I'm thinking, man, can't you just get it together? And so yeah, it really struck me really hard about, how deep your addiction was, because you just could not follow the straight and narrow.
Well, I will tell. I'm going to.
Oh, and sorry, I wanted to make a point there. There's one point in your book where you said, "I will never be sober again," and that really hit me hard. Like, to get to that point of the depths of addiction, where you never want to have a sober thought, that you're just going to stay in that state constantly for the rest of your life.
I remember. I know exactly what you're talking about. One thing that defines, and again, real addiction. So it's interesting. I'm going to talk out of both sides of my neck for a second, but sometimes two things can be true in the same space. Through a clinical lens, I could say this is true of me. Alcoholics or addicts are super complicated people with these intricate histories, and there's some PTSD from a car accident, some attachment disorder from early family trouble. And you probably could have easily stuck 6 or 7 diagnoses on me that would have reasonably fit if you got me talking long enough. And yet and here's the other part of the paradigm. Alcoholics are remarkably simple, or addicts are remarkably simple creatures. We use until we have to stop or something stops us. And then we stay stopped until something forces us to start again. And it could be as flimsy as it was Halloween, or it was a wedding, or it was, or I went to a wedding, but they didn't have any non-alcoholic champagne, just the craziest stuff. And the next thing
justification.
Right. And so, but if you step back and look at the cycle, it's like we stayed sober until something stopped us. And then we stayed stopped until something started us again. And sometimes, not always, but some of us gotta be pretty badly mangled. And obviously, I would say there was an enabling family system in there. There was a few times I wasn't close to rock bottom. I was at rock bottom and was probably ready to.
I would say you were below rock bottom. Rock bottom is here, and you were somewhere down here. Like it surprised me, the depth of your addiction and how where you were affected how you acted.
Right. I'm pretty resilient, dude.
No doubt.
I can take a real pounding, man.
It's called going pro.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, exactly.
So can you tell us about the times you ended up in prison?
So I've never been in prison. I have been.
Yeah.
Oh, who read the book?
I've been in the state hospital.
I used the wrong word.
You want to hear?
Okay.
You want to hear a funny story? I'm up in Phoenix. And my friend's like, you need to go to detox, right? And so I Googled this thing, and there's this place. And if you're on Van Buren Street in Phoenix, you're in the wrong neighborhood, friend. It's like, think Maine and Hastings, but a little more spread out. But just it's gnarly, and it ain't downtown. But I'm walking with my stupid little suitcase, right? And I see these giant gun towers and barbed wire fence. And there's a giant banner that says rehabilitation starts here. And I'm like, perfect. And I walk up to the fence, and there's a guy standing there holding a gun. And I got my suitcase, and I'm like, I'm here to get myself sorted out. And he says, yeah, brother, this is Alhambra State Processing Prison. You're looking for the state mental hospital. That's right around the corner next door. So go up and take a left. You know what I mean? And yeah, I was in the state hospital and it was about as bleak a place. I remember literally walking down a white tiled hallway and seeing a blood smear going down and kind of around the corner where somebody had gotten dragged, and you could kind of hear people screaming 24 hours a day. So I've been in places like that. But in terms of, I think I've done about a year total in county jail, and had some interesting and mixed experiences. Like I've always been a reader, so I always read the newspaper, and I remember there was a guy, little Mexican guy with braces, had to be all of 5'3" and 130 soaking wet, who was like, I think he had been hired to kill a family, and he killed the whole family, went back and told the guy he killed the wrong family, and then he's like, oh shit, oops, who knew? So he went back and killed the right family, and then he went to the drug dealer and said, you owe me double what you owe me, because and the drug dealer's like, no, it's your mistake. So he killed that guy and that guy's family. So by the time it was all said and done, I mean, this was some real cowboy shit. This guy had taken out like 14 people. And I they get everybody in orange and cuff you up in a chain and put you before the judge, and two inmates down. I'm like, that's the dude in the newspaper. I remember his name. It was Cesar Sanchez, as a matter of fact. And I'm like, man, it was just weird to see like this guy you had seen on the front pages of the newspaper, and he's like right there, like two chains down, So in and out, yeah, I think I did a total of just a year, and I really, there's a little bit of justice in this story. There's a little bit of grace in this story, and to be frank, there's a little bit of white privilege in this story, because my parents did get me an attorney, but I was arrested with a methamphetamine lab in my possession in 2001, and I wouldn't say arrested, I was raided by the U.S. Marshals. I mean, tank, helicopter, windows blown out, anything dramatic you've ever seen on the 6 o'clock news, with face masks and bulletproof vests and helmets and like the whole enchilada, man. And I was actually making crystal meth at the time when they came in, and their eyes got really wide, because I think they were like, they came in guns blazing, the windows exploded, the door was ripped off by a tank, and then they came in, and there was a noticeable pause for a second where they're like, hey, everybody watch your step or something's going to explode in our face, which was a possibility. Anyway, so yeah, they pull me out of there, and I'm cuffed, and so it was a very weird. Here's the weird thing about that story. There's probably some word for this, like I don't know what there's some syndrome where you're trying to like be cool with your captors or whatever. But I was telling the police, I'm like, so like this isn't that big of a deal, right? Like you think I'm going to be fine? Like I'm going to come out of this okay, right? And the guy looks at me and he's like, you're doing 8 to 20 years in the penitentiary. I don't know. All I could do was sigh. And I didn't have it in me to start crying or ask for my parents in front of someone like that. And this is kind of a morbid thing to say, but about a month ago, the Johnny Gaudreau thing, there was some tape of that guy, and everyone's like, look at this entitled prick. Like the judge talked to him and he sighed. He just sighed, like, and everyone's like, he's just a jerk that thinks he should be out. And this is just me and you guys talking. I'm like, nah, dude. He wasn't wearing orange. He was wearing a suicide smock. I know that sigh because I've given that one where you're just like, my life is over. It's over. You know what I mean? It's all done. And then, parents get me an attorney, and I don't want to take up too much time on this story, but basically by the time I got out, I fled. That I never went to court again. My parents had gotten me this great attorney, nicest guy on the planet, who had to come find me because I was homeless and living on the street and shooting heroin. And he would be like, and I would ask him for like $20, and he would just give me the $20 and bill my parents or whatever. And he would be like, hey, your arraignment is December 19th, and trying to walk me through this thing. And I think I finally told him, I'm not going to show up anymore, and I'm not doing this, and you can't help me, and nobody can help me. And, I would just close my eyes and step out into traffic on a daily basis. I really at that last year, I had no intention of living through that. I had no intention of going to jail for 8 years or 5 years or 3 years. I was just like, sometimes
I reached that point.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I walked Maine and Hastings my last trip in Vancouver, and obviously I'm a long way from that, but I like to let people know in whatever way I can. I see you, man. I see you. I used to walk in a gas station and grab my Funyuns and my soda and walk out, and they'd be like, "Hey, stop." And I would be like, "Hey, stop me. You got a gun under the counter? Use it. Use it." Like, and because if you don't, I'm leaving. And it was just, I wouldn't say brazen, or, it might have looked like brazen or like I was really being a jerk, but I really wanted to die, and was just like, I've gone so far off the cliff. You just can't come back from this. And so, and it turns out you can, in a way that was, I would describe it as a strange coincidence of synchronicities. And, I know the listener, I know, Vancouver, Portland, San Francisco, or I'm not necessarily a big religious guy, you guys, but something extremely, I'll say supernatural, perhaps divine. I don't mind saying that. So when I look back at the way it unfolded, that just happened like all over the place for me. And so I'd been living on the street for exactly 360 days. And the last day of my homelessness, I got beat up. This dude pretty much, he tuned me up bad. And I walked, there was a little social services place. There's probably a million like them back to Maine and Hastings, free food box, free whatever. And I walked in there to go get a bus pass. And the intention was I was going to go drink in Menlo Park, which is another side of town. And so, but you have to sign for the bus pass. So I said, let me get a bus pass. And this guy, I'd actually known him since high school. His name was Andy. He said, what do you need a bus pass for? And he wasn't handing me the clipboard. And I had to think on my feet quick. So I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe I was going to go to county detox or something, because I knew I couldn't tell him Menlo Park, or he wasn't going to give it to me. And he's still holding the clipboard and the bus pass. And he said, you don't need a bus pass. I'll drive you right now. And I didn't know this, but he had been watching me out the window and actually had done some back channel work and had written a specialized grant to get me state-sponsored treatment 2 months before.
Wow.
That guy actually died of heroin addiction 10 years ago, up in Chicago. But yeah, he took a stake in my life, and he took the time to fill out some paperwork and call some people. And that was the last day. That was November 22nd. That will be 22 years ago. And I'll tell you, that place was, they told me their case manager and discharge planner and all that. They're like, after a month, they're like, so where are you going to go? And it's like, I had nothing. Like, I'm not talking. And it was cool. They let me live there for 11 months for $150 a month. They're like, hey, paint some fences, fix some drywall, run the 12-step meeting down there. I'd still be living there today for $150 a month if I could. After 11 months, they're like, we need the bed. You can get going. But yeah, just these little apartments in downtown Tucson. And they just let me live there for 11 months and help the guys out. By this time, I had already re-engaged the legal system, and which I'll make a long story real short. I walked up to the barbed wire fence, and they put the cuffs on me, and I said, I'm here to make something right. They put the cuffs on me, and about 4 weeks later, I was in front of the judge. And this creative attorney had pleaded down to, I think they wanted to call it attempt to possess equipment used to manufacture a dangerous drug. That was the plea bargain from a class 2 felony. Because at the time, making methamphetamine was kind of up there with second-degree murder. It was a big deal. You know what I mean? And so they pleaded down to a class 5 or something. And the judge was just like, he kind of put the paperwork down. He looked exasperated, and he said, can anybody in this courtroom explain what this means? I don't even know what these charges mean. And I stood up. I remember this vividly. And I stood up and I said, I can tell you exactly what it means. It means I was making crystal meth. And I said, and everything that paperwork says, I did that and more and more. And I said, and I'm being taught with the people that I hang with in recovery that I need to be accountable for my actions. So whatever you think should happen to me, not that I had a choice, but whatever you think should happen to me, like I'm willing, I'll go. If you want me to go to the penitentiary, it's fine, I'll go. Like it's fine. You know what I mean? And I don't think he had ever heard that before, man. I think he'd heard a lot of, it's the girlfriend's fault, my parents.
A lot of scheming.
And he just looked at me and he said, like, I'm going to let you go today. And interestingly enough, it was only a year later, and my probate was like, he's like, I don't know who you were. I know who you are on paper, but like, you're a really good guy, man. And I'm going to petition to get rid of the last of your 5 years of probation. Like, there's no point. You're wasting our time and you're wasting my time by coming to visit with you. Because you're just a good guy, He
believed you.
Yeah. And then a year later in AA, a year later in 12-step, it's an anonymity issue, an attorney sized me up and he said, he said, I'll take your case pro bono. Let's go get your rights back. And so I should have been in prison for 20 years. And just 2.5 years later, I was already a citizen again and had 2 felonies overturned, expunged at the state level. You have the right to vote and own a firearm and all that good stuff. And yeah, it felt kind of like a legal miracle. It was quick like that. Like I was in some boiling water and just 2.5 years later, I was just a citizen again. It was just like kind of wild the way and there were some things, not to get into the legal technicality of it, but there are certain thresholds that I barely avoided having. If you get caught with a gun, in addition to fill in the blank, that's where that state anyway, it's called a mandatory minimum. You're going to prison for 5 years. And that's if they like you. If you get caught with a lab and a gun, you're going to the penitentiary for 5 years, and that's with a good attorney. Without one, it's like 25. You know what I mean? So there were some things that happened and didn't happen. And one of the things since, and if you guys don't mind, I'd like to spend at least a minute on it, is that was where I decided that I was going to give my life over to the care and well-being of other people. And that some of that, you guys, is very personal. I'm sitting in a 1,900-foot home in Dallas. And every Wednesday night for years, our house is full of, there's 2 or 3 people that identify as as having deeply troubled sex addict relationship, 2 or 3 more people that are in, like a Cocaine Anonymous program, a couple other people that have some codependency, 2 or 3 people that have extreme trauma. And we get together, we eat together, we talk. This isn't a paid thing. This isn't part of I work as a clinician too, and getting ready to open a treatment center in 2025. But this is just my life. It's what I do for fun and for free. There are 2 people that have reached out to me over Twitter over the years, who I won't mention because I'll keep their anonymity. But one of them was in a real jackpot about 10 years ago. And I stepped into his life and gave him the resources he needed. I found the resources for him. He's doing great. I think he may have gone back and gotten a broadcasting license since I last, or whatever, somehow works in radio or something. But most of it I do. A lot of it I do for fun and free. I just enjoy helping people. And then of course, I'm big into hockey, and I've been around long enough to really have developed some strong opinions. And if you don't mind, I might like to share one, if that's okay. And if there's, I'm sure someone out there listening, there's got to be at least one going through some stuff. And so maybe there's just a couple minutes of something I could say to that listener.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a book, I put it next to me because it's brilliant. It's by Dr. Nicole LaPera. It's called How to Do the Work. one of the things, especially when you're relying on public health care, you may find some help in what you're looking for. Here's where I really like, I've worked in mental health, substance abuse, and behavioral health for a long time. And I've really internally, I've made a lot of notes and I've done a lot of study in this. And one of the things I noticed as an example, when I've spent some time in South America, like months, and it was interesting. The more time I spent with these people living in the mountains, I didn't see anybody whose personality split in half in some schism or bipolar type 2, or that had developed like some sort of strange neurotic condition. Because as it turns out, people in South America, one, that they stay pretty busy. They don't have time to sit around and think about themselves a whole lot. Like the kids are running down to the stream and fetching water because we got clothes to wash and cows to feed and sheep. And then at the night, people don't stay in boxes and locked doors watching a screen that's telling them to be freaked out and afraid of everything. You know what I mean? People are very community based. So just side note, you don't really see mental illness in other cultures. It seems to be a luxury and seems to be born systemically in the way Westerners socialize and just in the social structures. The other thing you see a lot, and some people definitely have a chemical imbalance, but keep in mind, metabolically, nobody is born with an SSRI deficiency. Nobody on the planet. So when you talk about the level of metabolism, something is going on a lot of levels. Like I find it very curious that oftentimes in managed care, you have 15 minutes to describe the problem with somebody with a prescription pad that's going to try and hit a moving target. And yet, if you didn't ask someone the right question, you can get the whole diagnosis wrong. So describe what life feels like. Well, it's hard to get out of bed and I just don't want to work and nothing brings me any joy. But if you didn't ask enough questions, you might find out that they've been in a relationship for 10 years where they're deeply diminished by another human being, where they planted flowers and the guy ripped them all out and then said, and they're not able to. And so you're going to give them a medication that's going to jack them up neurologically because you didn't ask enough questions to go, you don't need an SSRI. You need a coach or a therapist to help you get out of a bad relationship because it's killing you. You see what I'm saying? Like we try and put people in these little boxes and make a pill fit that and not recognize, I work at an integrative medicine health hospital. We work with red light therapy and hyperbaric oxygen and glutathione and all different kinds of stuff. But we come at this from every angle to look at an entire life and how and where did this come off the rails and where did things go out of balance, and that's where you kind of put the intervention. Anyway, the reason why I brought this book up is sometimes when you're too reliant on a broken system of broken healthcare, hoping someone else is going to fix you, sometimes it's not a bad idea to realize. I do a podcast and I had Aaron Volpati on my podcast. Dude, that guy healed his whole body just with the power of his imagination. They told him, you will never skate again, and you're not leaving this hospital for 2 years where you're going to be in agonizing pain as we do skin graft after skin graft. And he said he just sat and meditated on connective tissue, just coming back and healing him. And they cut him loose 6 weeks later. 4 years later, he's playing in a Stanley Cup. And so, I mean, we all can't be Aaron Volpati, I get, but I think I want to empower the listener. Like, if you're going through some stuff, like you probably are more resourced than you think, and there's more options than you think, then I think it's really, now some people, bipolar type, listen, some people need to be medicated, and I don't want to suggest they're not, but I don't think that's always the first thing we should reach for. I think we should really feel into and get a sense of, where our problem's coming from. The problem, and still is in the United States, to get, I've slowly learned a whole lot over a long period of time and sort of have been enabled and empowered by the people around me to be able to do some stuff. But it
And ask the right questions.
Yeah, and it begins and ends with me. Here's the truth. Because I work in patient care all the time, the people that get well, the people that want to. And from that position, whether it's hyperbaric oxygen or neurofeedback or biofeedback, I know I'm just throwing words at you, all that stuff becomes the window dressing. But it's like my now friend, Aaron Volpatti, when something's alive in our chest, and that I think that's what happened to me. Sorry, I don't mean to get choked. This is just a hockey podcast. I don't mean to get choked up, but when I was 22 years living at that homeless place that they let me live at, something inside me just said, this isn't my life, and I ain't going to die like this. I'm not going to die, not like this. So let's get going, because we got some work to do, and that turned out to be true for me of just kind of coming back from a really, really, really tough spot. And
Life Concussed by Jeff Gould, a Memoriam of Brain Injury, Addiction, and Homelessness. A very important book. If you're into mental health or you're having problems, I highly recommend reading this book because it's excellent. And Jeff, it was so nice to meet you, and we'll hopefully have you on again, because I know you got more stories to tell. And thank you for writing the book. I gotta say, it was so well written. The syntax was like wave after wave after wave of emotion just coming at you over and over and over again, and it was so well written, and almost, there's almost a poetry in it, and so it really resonated with me, and I know it will with anybody who reads it. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for coming on.
That is really high praise, brother. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. And the world is smaller than we think. I'll be up there in me and my wife for our 5-year anniversary. We're going to Nynamo. We're going to Tofino, but we're circling back. We will be at the Saturday night, the November 9th, the Oilers Canucks games. Not again. So
right,
that game's gonna.
There better be good seats, because they were $900 in July.
Oh man, yeah, I know, it's incredible.
Yeah. I was like, it might have been. I don't know if it was a pre-sale, but I'm like, I'm not getting a good deal on these seats here. 4 rows back from the glass.
Paying full price.
So yeah.
Okay, Jeff, thanks again for coming on. We'll have you on again maybe after Christmas.
Absolutely, fellas.
We're pretty booked up until then, so we'd love to have you on again and tell more stories, because it's endlessly interesting.
It'd be great to see about grabbing a coffee when you're up here.
Yeah, for sure. Let's stay in touch through Messenger, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, man.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Very good.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jeff.